With the release of Linux kernel 6.7, bcachefs, a new file system, made its debut, and I thought to myself, I should casually test that by making it my default file system for everything.
What can possibly go wrong?
What can possibly go wrong? As we know, we've all got excellent backups. I'm fine.
Yeah.
So, bcachefs is a brand new file system. When I say brand new, it's been in development for about 8 or 9 years now. It started out as a sort of a side quest from the bcache project, which was a caching layer. And Kent Overstreet has been spearheading this for some time. So although it's new in the kernel, people have been using it as an out-of-tree experimental project for some time. And I've been following along its development for years, and I really wanted to give it a go.
I had no idea it was not the caching thing. I just thought it was the caching thing you were talking about when you put it in the notes. I didn't realize this was a whole file system that you could install on.
Yeah, a whole full file system. Okay. So I could say lots of file system-y mumbo jumbo, and I'm going to avoid doing that.
Oh.
That's interesting if you need to deploy a file system at scale and be responsible for it. But for the purposes of using it, I think we'll just focus on the features. And Kent has got some nice ways of sort of framing what he wants bcachefs to be. So essentially, he is striving for the performance and robustness of XFS, which is my preferred file system right now, but with the features of ButterFS and ZFS. So all of these things combined, and a native first party in the Linux kernel file system.
And is it native in the Linux kernel?
It is now in Linux 6.7 and newer.
Huh.
And because I'm running that there NixOS, that arrived on my doorstep just very recently through an upgrade. So I thought, right, this is the time. In fact, what prompted me to make it the time is my 2 main workstations were being rebuilt. So I was starting over on both of them anyway. So I thought, right, now is my opportunity. So it's got a number of interesting qualities. It does have those features from ButterFS and ZFS that people love, including subvolumes and snapshots and native encryption and the other thing, compression. So it does all of these things in the file system. And this was one of the things that I was really sort of wanting to use, because I've always found ButterFS and ZFS a little bit of a steep learning curve, particularly if you're coming into something new.
So one of the other features that those file systems are also touted as having is that they consume vast amounts of RAM. Is this also the case for bcachefs?
I haven't done anything to really sort of try and press on that, but my answer to that question is no, it seems really reasonable. So I'll explain what I've created, and that will unravel some of the features of bcachefs and why I'm using it. So I've got in total 22 terabytes of storage in 2 different machines. So that's 44 terabytes in total now being managed by bcachefs. In both the machines, I have a 2 terabyte drive, an NVMe drive, which is just a single device, and that's the root file system and the boot partition. And that's what it does. And then I have 5 4 terabyte drives, which are in, let's call it an array, but the sort of terminology in bcachefs is a little bit different. And this is where we get to now talk about some of the bcachefs features, in that by default, when you create a volume with multiple drives in it, it effectively stripes them. So RAID 0 is what you can think of that. But one of the qualities about this that I really like is you can have mixed size drives. It doesn't care if they're different sizes. Nice. And its balancing thread will automatically fill the drives at a different rate to ensure that they sort of fill together rather than, one getting maxed out and the others being way behind.
So this is striping. So it's just for performance across the disk. This isn't providing you with redundancy as well.
By default, no redundancy.
Right.
And this is where I was talking about, I know ZFS. I used it for years at massive scale, so I've learned it, and I tried to learn bcachefs, but it kept eating my data, so I decided I wasn't going to play that game anymore.
Just for balance, I used bcachefs for a long time and even pulled the power cable out of the array while it was on, and I lost nothing. So
Did you do that on purpose?
No, I kicked it. The cable came out in my data center, shall we say.
But learning bcachefs and ZFS, there is tons and tons of options to creating the file system and how you mount the file system and then the operation of the file system whilst it's running. bcachefs, from a technical point of view, aims to have clean, sort of simple code. And that's fine, but that does have an expression to the end user in that there are very few options available to you when you create the file system. So it's very easy to create a multi-device file system, and then it has a feature flag, which is replicas. And this is where you then say, I want the data to be available across X number of disks in my array, and this is where you now add the redundancy. So in my array, I have 2 replicas, which means that my data is available in at least 2 places.
And is it parodied like RAID 5 or is it mirrored like RAID 1? I don't mean is it identical to the way RAID 1 works and RAID 5 works, but is it like that?
I think so.
Okay.
And this is where Martin could run out of rope in the future because I've kind of just made some bold assumptions about some of this. And if it all goes wrong, I'm going to have a fun time.
Wait for a disk to fail and find out.
Right.
It's only 20 odd terabytes to lose. I mean,
yeah,
that's fine.
Well, it's being backed up. It's fine.
Yeah.
How I've configured that array is I've got two of the drives are 4 terabyte NVMe drives and 3 are SATA connected SSDs. And the other feature that bcachefs has, and its headline feature, why cache is in the name, is you can have tiered storage. So you can say, I want you to favor hot data and writing to this group of devices, and I want you to use this group of devices as like the write back store.
Oh, nice.
So what that means is it's operating off the NVMe drives for all of my stuff. And when I access something from the past, it will pull that data into that NVMe pool as the hot, fast data. And then when I'm no longer using it, it will get moved off onto the slower storage.
Oh, it does actually degrade the stuff off to keep the things balanced. And
yes, and it is called rebalancing. That is the process that happens to do that. Now, the other thing I've done is I've enabled the native bcachefs file compression, or file system compression as it happens. It's excellently documented, so you can find out in minutiae how all of this works and how to configure things, but it's very easy. You just tell it -- compression. If you create your file system with no compression, you can enable compression on a per file or per directory basis once the file system is up and running. So it's not a on or off. You can toggle it on and off as you like. So I said, make my file system with compression enabled. And then I've gone into a few directories where I have all of my videos, music and pictures. And I've said, don't bother with compression here because I know it's not going to compress well. So why tax it? So I have compression enabled, but again, the compression can have this tiering. So I've got least compression level LZ4 by default when it writes, and then in idle moments, it recompresses that data using a higher compression level. So when the system isn't busy, it then compresses it more, and you can choose from a number of different compression algorithms for that.
that does sound super interesting. And we've talked in a previous episode about I have a spare micro server that's not doing anything. I quite fancy having a play with this and chuck an SSD in there for the hot storage. And then I've got some horrible spinning Rust that I could use for, which is exactly what it was originally designed for, right? Like fast disks and slow disks.
Exactly what it was designed for.
Oh, that sounds super interesting.
Yeah. So I'm very happy with the setup. It's working. I have deposited about 5 terabytes of data into this volume. And I thought I'm going to go full belt and braces. And I've also enabled full file system encryption. So the whole thing is also encrypted. And that is it's either on or it's off. And you make that decision when you create the file system. But if you create a file system with encryption, you can disable the encryption after the fact, but you can't turn it on if you didn't create the file system with encryption in the first place.
Right.
But that means that now when my system boots, I get asked for my passphrase, and that unlocks this massive volume. And that massive volume is basically /home.
Has this file system been in super active use in industrial settings with huge volumes, someone like Facebook or Google or Netflix or something that would give you cause to be as bold as you're being by making it default?
No, I don't think so. So I know there has been a commercial sponsor of the bcache project for about 6 years. I don't know who that is. I do know that they have recently had to withdraw their funding because reasons. So Kent is strapped at the moment and he has a Patreon. So if you are interested in file systems and supporting the continued development, then I'll have a link in the show notes to that. But there is evidence of some organizations using up to 100 terabytes of storage on bcachefs, and there is an organization that are using it to back their databases, and they are making thousands of snapshots of the file system that the databases are running on per day in order to have this backup capability. And Kent has worked closely with them to make sure that that's super reliable. So there is good evidence out there of it being used. But of course, now it's in the kernel. If you go to the GitHub tracker, ever since the 6.7 kernel was released, there's a whole load of people coming out of the woodwork with, well, I've tried this. And there are issues, but interestingly, I haven't found any with the file system yet. It's because it's new. It's like everything else around mounting a file system struggles with it. So you create this large volume and it has multiple devices in it, and only when you have a multi-device bcachefs file system do you run into some sticky points. And that's that systemd doesn't know how to pass the multi-device string that defines a bcachefs file system. So you can't mount any file systems with systemd. So I had to change my boot process to do the file system mounting in the initial RAM disk using mount from BusyBox, because mount from BusyBox doesn't care what you send it as the mount path. It just hands it off to the appropriate file system mount process. So there are things like that where if you're doing multi-device, it's complicated right now. It will improve. There are issues open to fix this in Grub and systemd. But if you've only got single devices, maybe a laptop with 1 or 2 drives, then it's dead easy. Mounting and working on single devices with bcachefs is no issue whatsoever.
Have either of you chaps lost $500,000 this week?
Oh yeah, have you found it? Yeah, I was looking for that. Thanks,
Sit
Alan.
down the back of the sofa.
No, me neither. So I want to tell you a little story of the, in inverted commas, fun that I had at the weekend just gone.
What, losing $500,000?
Let me tell you a story. But before I begin, I have to tell you, for those who have not listened before, or for those who may have listened before and are just catching up, I don't work for Canonical. I'm just some well-meaning community guy who knows a little bit about snaps and the Snap Store. That's a bit of foreboding. And I don't have access to any internal information about the Snap Store or the snap that I'm about to talk about. And I don't know if any of this is true because I've just been talking to random names on the internet, and it's entirely possible that this whole thing is just a story and it's not true.
The plot feels quite thick and you haven't even started yet.
I know. I have to lay the caveat on thick, though, just in case people write in and go, well, actually. So the story begins at about 8 o'clock on Sunday morning. There was a post on the Snapcraft forum. Now, I have a pinned tab for the Snapcraft forum, and I look at it now and then, and I help people and stuff. And someone posted a question asking if a particular application in the Snap Store was a scam. Now, we sometimes get these kind of questions, but the wording was a bit specific. They said, can anyone tell me if the Exodus wallet in Ubuntu Software Center is a scam? My wallet is empty after recovering, and it shows a recent transaction of my entire balance sent to an address. I never made this transaction, which sounds worrying, right?
Yes.
I didn't see that until later on because, you know, it's Sunday and I was busy playing video games, but I saw it about 6 o'clock and I did a little bit of digging and I looked at the application in the store, and I looked at the upstream brand that went along with it, and the upstream publisher has an application on their website, but the application in the store did not match the application on their website. And so I thought, oh dear, this does not look good. I had a little poke around, and I gave a reply on the forum and said, it doesn't look official. And, I had to caveat a little bit because I don't know who the person is that published it. And so I just don't know. It's got a name in the store that looks semi-legit, but I said, it doesn't look legit to me. It could be someone making like a third-party wallet application, but it doesn't look legit to me.
And what were your indicators that this was not legit?
So the application that's published on the upstream website is called Exodus, and it's one of these like crypto wallet things, and it's built with Electron. And you know that because if you download the zip and unpack it, there's the hallmarks of, it's big and it's got lumps of chromium in it. There's it's an Electron app, right? And the one that I got from the store, which I did just by doing snap download and then the snap name, and then I used bcachefs to unpack it and poke around inside, was definitely not an Electron app for a start. It was only like 20 meg in size. And that's like a big red flag because Electron apps are usually a little bit more weighty than that. So it was actually a Flutter application. So I thought, it's a desktop app written in Flutter, not an Electron app. And so that was the sniff test that made me think this isn't genuine because it's not the upstream application. And so I replied to them, and then I followed up about half an hour later. I span up a VM. I thought, well, I've got a bit of time. I can poke around a little bit further.
You've got some spare cryptocurrency lying around.
So, I wanted to see what it did. Like, I was interested. So I spun up a Ubuntu VM, and I actually did snap install and installed the thing. And I'd already poked around a little bit to see if it would start any daemons and start sniffing around my network, but it looked like it didn't. It looked like it was one executable that would launch when you run it, like a normal desktop program. And there were also some other hallmarks. The snap metadata was the default, like insert description here and insert name here. Not a maximum amount of effort was made on this thing. And the version number was like 1.0 and stuff like that. Anyway, I ran it, and I also had a network sniffer running at the same time to see what it would do. And it popped up a plausible looking screen that asked for a 12-word recovery phrase. So there were just 12 fields on the screen with a plausible looking backdrop and an OK button, basically. And so I just mashed keys and typed any old rubbish into all of the 12 fields and hit the button. And when I hit the button, there was network traffic that went off to a Linode box somewhere. And I tried it 2 or 3 times, and it just errors and says your passphrase is wrong. So what I'm guessing this person did is put in their genuine 12-word passphrase. And I suspect from the way the story goes, it connected to some API online and then moved this person's money to another Bitcoin wallet.
Wow.
That's what I suspect. That's what I figured probably happened. And so I added that to my forum post as well and said, just the facts. I've run it and it looks like it does this. And about half an hour later, I thought I should tell someone about this, not just the person on the forum. What I mean, half an hour later, I mean half an hour of noodling around in the VM. So I sent an email to security@ubuntu.com, and I also tagged the security team on the forum. But it was like 7:00 on Sunday evening, so I figured nobody would be looking at that. And for belt and braces, I also clicked the report application in the Snap Store. There's a button on the web UI where you can just say report this app, and it'll ask you why. And so I just linked to the forum. And then I kind of left it alone for a bit. And then nearly midnight on Sunday, so about 4 or 5 hours later, I got a response from the security team saying it looks like someone on the Snap side has already removed it because the Snap has gone and I can't see it anymore. So yay, it's gone. So that's the end of that from my point of view. And I was interested to like look around and see if anyone online had been discussing this, whether this was a widespread thing. And I actually found a thread on 4chan. Yeah. I didn't go looking there, but I'm good at Google, and I stumbled across 4chan, and there was a thread about the same time as the forum thread on Snapcraft from someone describing basically the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And so I suspect what the person did was talk about it on 4chan, then bring it up on the Snapcraft forum. And actually they linked to the Snapcraft forum conversation in the 4chan thread.
Right. Okay. So good chance it's the same.
Probably the same person.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what was more alarming, well, unsurprising probably, is the lack of support and empathy they got from 4chan.
Oh dear.
And they mea culpa'd and said, well, you know, it was my own stupid fault for typing in my recovery phrase into a random application, you know. But, oh dear, I've lost a chunk of money. And a few people asked how much. And they didn't actually say how much, but they did say the wallet address and the transaction ID, which you can look up on any like Bitcoin transaction explorer. So I went and had a look. And yeah, it was 9 Bitcoin, which at the time was like $490,000 worth of Bitcoin.
Yikes.
Wow.
That they've just completely lost.
What's going through my mind here is if this is a Flutter application.
That's the first thing that's going in your mind. Okay.
Yeah, well, no. So what I'm thinking is targeting the Snap Store doesn't feel like a bounty of opportunity. But if this is a Flutter app, well, it turns out that spearing this one fish, which happened to be a whale, worked, right? So
yes.
maybe it was worth the effort just speculatively doing that. But because it's a Flutter application, I wonder if this same application is going to turn up in other stores where you can publish Flutter applications for Android and iOS and other things. And if this will be a more widespread attempt to purge people's Bitcoin wallets.
Yeah, interestingly, when I was searching, I found this is not a new thing. This thing's called Exodus. And there have been Exodus scams, in inverted commas, online before. And some of them look very much like this,
Right.
in that they show the branding in the background and then the fields for 12 parts of your passphrase or your wallet recovery phrase. So the Flutter app may be inspired by other people who've done this before, or it might be the same group of people. We just don't know. And I doubt we ever will know. But, you know, it's a Flutter app, so they could just publish it online. They could create a website, and if they can trick enough people to click through and empty their wallet, then, yeah, it's, you know, in inverted commas, easy money for them. And this is not the first time there's been some dodgy crypto thing in the Snap Store. I think it's about the third or fourth time now. They've operated in different ways each time. One of them was a game with a file inside it that had a crypto miner in it.
And it was Monero miner, wasn't it?
That's right, yeah. And hilariously, the crypto miner binary was called System D. So if you looked at it in top, you'd see System D consuming all your CPUs and think, oh, that's all right, that's normal. Not realizing it's actually inside this snap and, you know. And, you know, that was removed pretty quickly. And there was another one recently as well. And now this one, and it's triggered a conversation. I don't know what conversations are going on internally in Canonical. Obviously, I'm not privy to those. But certainly someone started another thread just after this happened to say, what should we do about this? Should we ban crypto entirely from the Snap Store? Or should we gate them in some way? Or should there be an extra human intervention that reviews these things before they land in the store? And bearing in mind, this thing was only in the store for 2 days. And that 2 days of being in the store, and it caught someone straight away. I think there was only one revision published in the store. It's not like they iterated on it in the store and published it for months, and then it was discovered. It was in there for 2 days, and they got someone.
Well, it shows whatever the discovery mechanisms are for new snaps in the Snap Store works, right?
So always looking for the silver lining in that cloud. Yes.
Well, that's kind of our shtick, right? Is find the positive angle. Looks like the Snap Store's doing a good job of app discovery.
True. Also, it seems to be pretty straightforward to package up a Flutter application and publish it in the store. So,
Right.
yeah, if we're mining for positivity out of this unfortunate incident, then yeah, there's lessons to be learned, and there's a bit of education that needs to go on there. And I don't know what Canonical are going to do about this, but I do think something must be done, and it shouldn't be up to someone like me, a rando external people, outside of Canonical doing this on a Sunday night.
Yeah.
It really should be Canonical doing this.
I have pulled the trigger on my server replacement.
Oh, what'd you get?
What did you do?
Yeah, we need to know.
So we mentioned last time that I've been running an HP microserver, which was at the time the server that all of the Linux geeks were getting excited about. So I thought this time I would go with the Linux server that all of the Linux geeks seem to be getting excited about today, which seems to be the Dell Wise 5070 thin client.
Yeah.
Yes.
Not exactly server class hardware, is it?
Well, this is the thing. So they're thin client machines. They're designed for like offices to put on every desk and connect to other services, basically. This model has been discontinued by Dell, but you can pick them up on eBay for about 50 quid. But if you look at the specs and you look at the specs of my microserver, it's actually quite a bit more powerful for probably, if you adjust for inflation, about a quarter of what I paid for the microserver. So it's got a 4-core processor, which is clocked a bit higher than the microserver's processor. It came with 8 gig of RAM. It doesn't have a load of hard drive bays like the microserver does. I'll come on to that in a minute. It just has one SSD SATA slot. So I bought a 1 terabyte SSD to stick that in there. But generally speaking, it seems to be pretty capable of sitting there quietly because it doesn't have a fan. It's all passively cooled, running and doing the sort of servery things that I do, which is, having small things running in the background rather than doing lots of big, powerful things and lots of people accessing it. Particularly interestingly, I got an energy monitor for Christmas, and while I was waiting for this to arrive, I plugged my microserver into it to see how much power it was using. And then when the Wise arrived, I plugged that into it to see how it compared. And it turns out that the microserver is sitting there happily consuming about 60 watts all the time, all day, every day. Whereas the Wise, it uses about 3 watts when it's idle and 12 watts when it's going absolutely full tilt. And I did a back of the envelope calculation on this, and I worked out that just in the savings in energy, this will pay for itself in under a year for the unit itself. And if you include the SSD, it will pay for itself in about 2 years, just in my energy bill that I'm going to save. My plan is to take a bit of a leaf out of Martin's book. So I'm going to keep the microserver around, and I'm going to use that for backups and storage of media and things that need a lot of space. But I'm only going to run it when I need it so that I don't have it constantly consuming energy.
Can I just point out that there's this trend going around on TikTok called girl math about how women going shopping and buying products that are in a sale, and it saved them money. The fact that you've just explained how it's saving money and paying for itself, but then you're also going to keep the old server running is total boy math, I think.
No, because I'm only going to be running it doing stuff overnight when energy is cheapest.
Okay.
Right.
I'll allow that then.
Or on the occasion where you actually need to access something on it during the day, and then I'll have it set up to shut itself down afterwards.
Okay.
More of this in the future.
I think if my memory's correct, those microservers actually have in the BIOS a wake up at this time, shut down at this time schedule. Mm-hmm. So you can actually have them come on and go off at, peak energy efficiency in order to meet your backup window and that sort of thing. And I know you're already an enthusiastic Wake on LAN user, but I can imagine your remotes are going to be, right, we're going to watch Mark flicks now, and you push a button on the remote and it wakes the server up with a jellyfin or whatever.
Yes, and I will come on to that in a future episode.